Almost every time we talk about manure here in Ag PhD, Darren and I will probably relate some story from back when we were kids. We used to have to scoop hog manure starting at a very young age. We're very familiar with manure.
Some of us weaseled out of that job a little bit earlier in life than others.
Hey, all I know is I've handled plenty of manure in my lifetime, scooping it by hand, moving it with the skid steer loader, spreading it on the field. We've got all kinds of years of experience handling manure, and we've also really looked hard at this thing because here's what Dad used to tell us when we were growing up. Well, that's the smell of money. I don't believe that. Here's what I believe. That's the smell of lost money. Because if you can smell it, that was something that, hey, if I put it in the ground, it could be a good thing for my next crop. I don't want to smell manure. We want to do everything we can to reduce the smell, not only so it helps us with non-farmers, but so we can maximize our fertility value.
There's a lot of value in manure, especially when you look at today's fertility prices. The other thing with manure is this can really be a negative thing for us on the farm if we don't manage it properly. If we have runoff into rivers or streams or problems that way, or just odor problems with our non-farm neighbors, I mean, it can give us a bad name as farmers. So we want to do everything we can to manage it right. The first thing I'll say in terms of tips for manure management is get the manure tested so you know what the nutrient levels are. We don't want to over apply manure to a field. We want to put on the right amount to feed the next crop. If we're over applying where we've got such an excess of nutrients that we have issues with leaching away or running off, that's where we can get into trouble.
Well, the things we're most concerned about are nitrogen and salt. Okay, because with nitrogen, that can leach down, like Darren said, and with salt, if you get too much salt, that's really, really harmful for your soil. Now, what most people are focused on is the amount of phosphorus that's in there. We're not really concerned by that, and here's why. Because we want you to inject your manure or at least get that tilled very deeply in your ground. Here's what you need to understand with phosphorus. It doesn't move in soil. If I take it and I place it 8 inches deep, guess what? Until it gets used up, it stays at pretty much 8 inches deep. It might move to 9, but it's really not going anywhere. So where the problem comes is if you lay all that manure on top of the ground and you lightly work it in, well, guess what? You've got all your manure, all that phosphorus in the top inch or two, and sure, nitrogen can move down, sulfur can move down, boron can move down, potassium can move very, very slowly, but it can still move more than phosphorus. Phosphorus is the real problem. If you get any erosion off that field and your soil moves, what moves with it? Phosphorus. Phosphorus is the #1 water quality issue we have in the United States today. We've got to keep it in our fields, and it starts with applying it correctly. That means put it deep. When you put that manure deep, not only are you going to dramatically reduce the smell, now you have properly applied your phosphorus, you have properly stored your phosphorus, and you're going to prevent any future problems with phosphorus runoff on your farm.
The other thing in terms of managing that odor is just timeliness. We can't get too far ahead where we're spreading manure out over a lot of acres. We can only put it on what we're for sure going to get covered. I was talking to a farmer just outside of a very large city, and he said that was one of the worst mistakes they'd ever made is they spread it on more acres than they could get covered in one day. A rainstorm came up, and then you put fresh manure on top of the ground and then get rain, and then the wind blew right into town. He said he had so many complaints, people thought he was the worst farmer ever. He's like, man, I made one mistake of I spread one field too many that we couldn't get to. He goes, I will never do that again. We're going to do one field at a time from here on out.
Here's the other big thing we encourage you to do. Consider one of these products to stabilize the nitrogen in there and also to help keep the phosphorus available in the future. So we're talking about products like More Than Manure that can do both those things, or there are just plain nitrogen stabilizers that you could use. So take a real hard look at some of these things. But the big thing is, like Darren said, be timely, don't over apply, get your manure tested. You gotta do these things. These aren't steps that we used to take a generation ago, or especially 2 generations ago, but in modern agriculture today, we need to. We need to do the right things, not only for us and for our farm, but for the environment and the soil as well.
Well, manure is certainly valuable. We want to manage it correctly. Another thing we need to manage properly is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.